Well, welcome to the lower extremity. This is going to be going over what we would commonly call the leg, the girdle that holds it on, and the bones of it. Again, try not to get overcomplicated. We have a foot. This one we call the patella. We'll go over. That's a kneecap. There's only 3 long bones. And then we have this guy called the coxa. A lot of people call it the hip bone. That is not what you would be able to get away with here. So this is basically where in the shoulder girdle or the pectoral girdle, there were 2 working together on each side. So there's 4 total. On this, there's only 2 parts. And if you look at this, and I've got him set up to kind of help us with some stuff here to look at, this is what we call the pelvis. This would be the coxa, the bone that makes up the one side. Now, it is made up of 3 bones that are fused together. And so if I'm holding it up like this, that big indentation, not the hole itself, but this indentation, we're going to learn, this is called the acetabulum. This would be equivalent to the glenoid cavity in the scapula, but this is the joint, the articulation area of the hip joint. And so that's a pretty good dividing line here. So if I'm looking at it and I put this like this and I kind of step back, there is only 1 bone that's above this. All right. So like I said, there's 3 bones that are fused together. The one that is up here, this part, the large, big, like mouse ear part of this, that is called the ilium. The ilium is, if you put your hands on your hips, that's what you feel. Or if you wear a belt, your belt is pretty much sitting on your iliac crest, the ilium. So the iliac crest is actually this little ridge that goes all through here. So if I'm looking at this, like I said, this is going to be the acetabulum, which is going to be where this, which is probably the easiest bone to recognize. This is the femur. We'll look at it in a second. And that's the head of the femur. The head of the femur fits into the acetabulum. You can kind of see it again here on the model. Now, like I said, so above this is the ilium. So if I look at this little spot here, the little round spot, right, so I'm going to poke it up like this, and I said in between here, that's pretty much the dividing line of the ilium. So this area, this little hole is called the Obturator Foramen. The Obturator Foramen. This little hole is where we're going to see the 2 other bones. Now, I don't know if you can kind of tell, but this is a very rounded part, and this is a very pointed part. The pointed part goes anterior. This anterior part is going to be the pubic bone, and the posterior part's called the ischium. I'll show you another way to kind of tell which way is which. So if I'm looking at this bone and I turn it around, you'll see a very rough spot here. It is on the opposite side of where the acetabulum is. That rough spot is where the sacrum fits into. So if I know that's where the sacrum is, I know that that's pointing both anterior and medial. So if I've got this pointing anterior and medial, then I know that this little spot here is going to be anterior because this points anterior. The anterior section is called the pubic bone. And so the 3 bones that make this up are the ilium, the pubic bone or the pubis, and the ischium. So they would be the ilium, the pubic bone or pubis, and the ischium. If you are sitting down, you are sitting, we kind of jokingly say you'll sit on your butt bone. That is what we're talking about. That is why this is a little bit thicker and rounded, because this is what you sit on. Now, in this, we're going to have a couple of things. The rounded part that sticks out, this is called the ischial tuberosity. Again, it's mainly because I am going to sit on this, and you can kind of see that it thickens out here as you go around onto it. That's the ischial tuberosity. And then if I look at the pubic bone, there's a little ridge right through here, and you can kind of see it pretty well the way the shadow is. This is called the pubic crest. Now, in the earlier labs, you probably learned about the abdominal pelvic cavity. There's a distinct dividing line between the thoracic and the abdominal pelvic cavity called the diaphragm, but there's no real clear dividing line between the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity that you can see externally. But this little ridge right here, this pubic crest, it'll go through and it actually goes across the sacrum. There's a little sacral crest. This is a line that is the actual anatomy dividing line. This is where the dividing line is. And so when you're in the skeletal system, you'll probably learn that there is a fake or false pelvis. Anything from this up is considered the false pelvis. Ooh, I didn't have it. So anything from here up is the false pelvis, and anything from this down is the true pelvis. In lab, you won't have to know that I know of. And so if I'm looking at the ilium, or at the coccyx, I have the ilium, and I have the pubis or pubic bone, and the ischium. I have, this is the acetabulum. This big hole is called the obturator foramen. All right, so now we're going to move on to, again, probably the most recognizable bone. This is the femur, the longest and strongest bone of the body. So when we look at the femur, we have a very obvious head. Now the head, if we have a head anywhere, we're going to have a neck. So this is the head of the femur. This is the neck of the femur. Now on the head of the femur, there is a little indentation here. You can kind of see it. If I rotate it around, you'll see how the shadow hits it. That little indentation is called the Fovea Capitis. Now, just real quick, fossa generally means big indentation. A fovea means a smaller indentation. We looked at the capitis that is on the femur and said that that's where the capitis, the head of the radius, fits onto the capitis. And I said a capitis generally means head. And so this is called the Fovea Capitis because it is the small indentation on the head of the femur. Now, I've got the head of the femur and the neck of the femur. And then if I look at it this way, which these two things were going to be on the opposite side, you'll see them better. I have bumps that you can see on either side of this. And so these are called trochanters. Now remember, in the humerus, they were called tubercles. And I said that if you can remember the inner tubercle groove, it helps you remember their tubercles. These are trochanters. If I flip it this way, you can see them a lot better. So I have the superior or the greater trochanter and the lesser trochanter. And the greater trochanter is what if you feel on your hip, quote unquote, and you feel that bump, that's what you're feeling, the greater trochanter. And it is, when I was in chiropractic, I would have people come in and talk about their hip hurting them. And I'd tell them, we'd look and it was mainly a muscle issue because the hip joint is well inside of that. So those are the parts of the proximal femur. If I look at the distal femur, now we're going to see the area where the joint of the knee is. So if I put this other one here, it would come together and I would have this little joint of the knee. Now, I have two parts to it and they're raised up, and so these are called condyles. So the condyles, I have a lateral and medial condyle on here. And so you would have to know what is lateral and medial. So if I put this back up this way, unless I have a really serious accident, the head of the femur is always going to be pointing medial. So this is always the medial condyle, where this is always the lateral condyle. Now the condyle is actually where the joint is, but there is another structure you need to know that is just a little bit superior or above the condyle, and they're called epicondyles. These are points of muscle attachment. And so the word epi means above or outer. So if I have a condyle here, so this is the medial condyle, right? So if I have a medial condyle here, I have this bump right here, and it is called the medial epicondyle because it's above the condyle. If I have the lateral condyle here, I have this little bump, and it is called the lateral epicondyle because it is above the condyle. Remember, the condyle is going to always be on the articular part. This is going to be covered with articular cartilage, and so the condyle is actually here. The epicondyle is just, the name is just trying to tell you it's above the condyle. All right, so those are the parts of the femur. Now, with that, we're going to look at a brief little spot, a very short little one here. This is called the patella. This is a sesamoid bone. To me, it looks like a little piece of uncooked biscuit dough. And so it is, like I said, a sesamoid bone, which means it's a bone that develops inside a tendon or ligament. And so it is what we commonly call the kneecap. Now, if I look just on the other side of where the patella is, so we're looking at our model, the femur. So on the lower part of the leg, I'm going to have two bones. One of them is much larger than the other. I'm going to show them here. So one of them is much larger than the other. This, which is the smaller one, is the fibula, and it is the one that has LA in it. Now, one of the things you can remember when I was in school, my professor said, a fib is a little lie. So you can remember the little bone in the leg is the fibula. Now again, remember, this is a big jigsaw puzzle. I'm a pretty big guy, and if I was trying to put that in my arm, man, that wouldn't fit. There's only one place this fits. And it's only in the leg. And if you're thinking this is the femur, that person's got a real serious osteo problem. So there's only one place, the little bone in the leg, and the fib is the little lie, so this is the little bone in the leg. And it is called the fibula, and you can remember it has the LA in it because this is the lateral bone in the lower leg. The other one is called the tibia. Now we're going to look at parts of these, but the tibia, if you look at this, now this always helped me, and I'm big on trying to figure out ways to make stupid things kind of stupid sayings help you remember certain things. So to me, I'm a chiropractor. I studied in Atlanta. I was in Atlanta. I graduated right after the Olympics were there. And so I liked, everything was Olympic crazy in Atlanta at that time. And so when I looked at this looks like a torch. And if you actually watch some movies, a lot of movies where someone will grab a bone like Raiders of the Lost Ark and wrap a thing around it and hold it as a torch, it's this bone. Now, I could remember, again, it's Olympic crazy there as I'm studying this. So we always said that or my buddies and I, when we were figuring out ways to remember these, we would say, to be an Olympic athlete, I wanted to carry the torch. And hopefully you caught that. Tibia, Olympic athlete, we wanted to carry the torch. Tibia, torch. To be an Olympic athlete, I wanted to carry the torch. So I could remember the tibia was the bone that looked like a torch. Now, the tibia has a couple parts to it that you need to know. Now, I'm going to point out a couple of things, and hopefully I'll make it as simple as I can. First of all, this little ridge right here, this little bump is called the tibial tuberosity. This is where the patella ligament is going to start. Now, it's called a ligament because ligaments are going to be between two bones. Tendons are between bone and muscle. And so it starts here and it attaches to the patella bone. And so this is a ligament. And then from the patella bone, it attaches to the quadriceps, which makes that the patella tendon. So anyway, this is called the tibial tuberosity. Now on either side of this little ridge, these are called condyles as well. And so since we know that this bone here, the fibula is lateral, if I look at this bone, I'm going to go down to the distal end, and you can see this little thing right here. This is called the medial malleolus because if the fibula is lateral, that means the tibia is medial. So this little part here, if you ever feel around your ankle, the little bump at your ankle on the medial side is actually this part of the tibia. It's the medial malleolus. So if I know that this is the medial malleolus, I follow it up here, I know that this is the tibial or the medial condyle, and then this is the lateral condyle. Now, from that point, when we look at the fibula, the only thing I want you to know about the fibula, and it's hard to tell the difference, this part here that actually is pointed out, this is going to be the head, and this flat part that sticks out here is going to be the distal end. So this is the head of the fibula, and then this distal end, since this part right here is called the medial malleolus, this is called the lateral malleolus. And so if we look at where this is with the foot, you can see that it sticks down a little bit farther, a little bit more inferior than on the tibia there. And the last thing we look at is going to be the foot. Now, I had talked to someone, we don't have to know the names of these in particular, so I'm just looking at, when we look at the foot, I have a group of bones that are called tarsals. In the foot, there are only 7 tarsals. All right? Remember, in the hand, we had 8 carpals. There are only 7 tarsals. And so I'm going to kind of set this here, and I'm going to point out there are 2 that you do need to name. One of them is the large one. This is what we would commonly call the heel bone, but this is called the calcaneus. And now the heel area is the calcaneal area. Then we have what is the actual joint, the ankle joint, which is this little part here. And so this bone is called the talus. The talus is the actual ankle joint. Now the rest of them, we don't have to know the names of them. Just as a group, they're called the tarsals. And so in the foot I have tarsals, in the hand I have carpals. And so just like in the hand, the foot, just like in the hand, these bones are going to be referred to in relation to this. So these are called metatarsals. Again, the hand has carpals, metacarpals. In the foot we have tarsals and metatarsals. And so this, again, is the body of the foot. Then we get into the toes, and just like the hand, the bones of the toes are called phalanges. And so that's the lower extremity.